For 15 years, I paid every single bill for the house my mother lived in, asking for nothing in return. But when my husband was fighting for his life and I asked for help, she laughed and chose my sister. So I sold the house. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The sound of a ventilator is something you never truly forget. It isn't just a mechanical hiss and click. It is the rhythm of your own anxiety, a metronome counting down the seconds between hope and absolute devastation. I sat in the plastic chair next to the bed, my body folded into a shape that felt unnatural, my spine aching from 48 hours of rigid tension. James looked so small in that bed. My husband, usually the one who filled a room with his laughter and his broad shoulders, was now reduced to a pale figure beneath a tangle of tubes and wires. The car accident had been violent, a sudden collision of metal and glass that had shattered our quiet Tuesday evening and left him with multiple fractures and significant internal swelling. The doctors had been cautiously optimistic an hour ago, but the reality of the recovery path was setting in. 6 months, they said, maybe a year, rehabilitation, constant care. And the bills. Even with insurance, the COPAs and the loss of income were going to be a tsunami that would hit us before James could even walk again. I looked at my phone. It was the only lifeline I had to the world outside this sterile, white box. My hands were trembling, not from cold, but from exhaustion so deep it felt like it was in my marrow. I needed help. I didn't need money, James and I had savings, though they would drain fast. I needed presence. I needed someone to sit with him so I could go home and shower, or handle the insurance adjusters, or just scream into a pillow for 10 minutes without terrifying the nurses. I scrolled to the contact labeled Mom. Barbara. I hadn't called her yet. The accident had happened so fast, and the surgeries had been back-to-back. But surely, this was what family was for. This was the moment where all the petty grievances and the distance dissolved. I pressed the call button and held the phone to my ear, stepping out into the hallway. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, a sickly yellow buzz that made my headache worse. It rang 4 times. I was about to hang up, assuming she was asleep, though it was only 10 in the morning on a Saturday. Hello, her voice was bright, airy. There was background noise, clinking silverware, the murmur of a crowd. She was at brunch. Mom, my voice cracked. I hadn't realized how dry my throat was until I tried to speak. Mom, it's Ava. Ava, oh, hello, darling. You sound terrible. Is everything all right? You're interrupting a very funny story Ruby is telling. I squeezed my eyes shut, leaning my forehead against the cool painted cinder block of the hospital wall. Mom, listen to me. It's James. He was in a bad car accident. It's bad, Mom. He's in the ICU. There was a pause on the line. For a second, I thought the call had dropped. Oh my, she said. Her tone shifted, but it wasn't the panic or deep concern I expected. It was the polite concern one might offer a neighbor whose cat had run away. Is he going to be okay? He's alive, I said, tears finally spilling over, hot and stinging. But he's got a long road. Mom, I'm alone here. I've been here for 2 days straight. I need you to come, just for a few days. I don't have anyone else to help coordinate things while he's in this state. I waited for the I'm on my way. I waited for the what hospital are you at? Oh, Ava, she sighed, a sound that implied I was asking for something incredibly inconvenient, like moving a piano. You know I would love to support you, but I simply can't right now. I blinked, the tears stopping abruptly as shock took over. What? What do you mean you can't? Well, Ruby is having a crisis, Barbara said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. She's incredibly stressed. Her youngest, Leo, he didn't get into that private preschool she wanted. The wait list is miles long. She's distraught, Ava, absolutely distraught. I promised I'd stay with her this week to help her process it and look at other options. I stared at the scuffed linoleum floor, unable to comprehend the words coming out of the speaker. Mom, James is in the ICU. He almost died. And you're saying you can't come because Ruby is sad about a preschool waitlist. It's not just a waitlist, Barbara snapped, her tone hardening defensively. It's her mental health. Ruby is sensitive, you know that. She needs her mother right now. You've always been the strong one, Ava. You're capable. You have that high-powered job, you have resources. Ruby needs me, Mo. Ray, I am asking you for help, I whispered, my voice trembling with a rage I had never felt before. I am your daughter, and my husband is broken in a hospital bed, and I am asking you to come help me. And I said no, she replied, her voice crisp and final. Don't be selfish, Ava. It doesn't suit you. I'll send a card for James. Now I really must go. The waiter is bringing the mimosas. The line went dead. I stood there in the hallway, the phone still pressed to my ear, listening to the silence where a mother's love should have been. The betrayal cut deeper than the fear of the accident. It was a cold, sharp knife twisting in my gut. The betrayal was worse than the diagnosis itself. I didn't go back into the room immediately. I couldn't. I felt physically ill, a nausea rolling through me that had nothing to do with the hospital cafeteria food and everything to do with the conversation I had just finished. I walked to the end of the corridor where a large window overlooked the parking lot. The world outside was moving along as if nothing had happened. Cars were parking, people were walking in with flowers, the sun was shining on the asphalt. It felt insulting that the world hadn't stopped just because mine had shattered. Don't be selfish, Ava. The words echoed in my mind, bouncing around my skull like a ricocheting bullet. Selfish. I leaned my head against the glass. I closed my eyes, and the ledger opened in my mind. It was a mental spreadsheet I had tried to ignore for years, a tally of transactions I had filed under love and duty that I now realized should have been filed under exploitation. I thought about the house. 12 years ago, after my father passed, Barbara had played the part of the helpless widow to perfection. She couldn't manage the estate, she couldn't work, she couldn't possibly live in an apartment. She needed the family home. It was her sanctuary. But she couldn't afford it. Her pension was meager, and she had never saved a dime in her life, preferring to spend it on appearances. Dinners, clothes, gifts for Ruby. So I stepped in. I was 24, just starting my climb in the corporate operations world, making good money for the first time in my life. I bought the house. I paid off the reverse mortgage my parents had taken out. I put the deed in my name to protect the asset, but I told her, Mom, you live there, just pay the utilities. I'll handle the mortgage, the property taxes, the insurance. It's your home. For 12 years, every month, $2,400 left my bank account and went toward that house. I did the math in my head, staring at a red sedan circling the lot below. $2,400 a month, 12 months a year, 12 years. That was over $345,000. And that didn't include the emergencies. The new roof in 2018, $12,000. The furnace replacement, $6,500. The time Ruby needed a car and Mom cried to me until I loaned Barbara $5,000 that I never saw again. I had paid nearly $500,000 to keep a roof over her head. I had worked 60-hour weeks, missed vacations with James, driven a 10-year-old Honda while Barbara drove a leased Lexus I helped Kasen for, all so she could be comfortable. All so she wouldn't have to worry. And when I asked for 3 days of her time, 3 days to sit in a chair and hold my hand, she chose mimosas with Ruby. I felt a vibration in my pocket. It was a text from her. Please don't be dramatic about this, Ava. We can visit in a few weeks when things settle down with the school situation. Give James my love. I stared at the screen. The screen blurred as my vision swam. The audacity was breathtaking. It was almost impressive how completely she had dehumanized me. To her, I wasn't a daughter. I was an ATM. I was a utility. I was the sturdy foundation she walked on to get to her golden child. I put the phone away and turned back toward the ICU. I walked past the nurse's station, my heels clicking on the floor in a steady, militant rhythm. I wasn't crying anymore. The sadness had evaporated, burned away by a white-hot clarity. I walked into James's room. He was awake, his eyes groggy, shifting toward me. "Hey," he rasped, his voice barely a whisper through the mask. "Hey," I said, moving to his side and taking his hand. It was warm. He was here. He was my family. The man in this bed was the only family I had. "Did you call her?" he asked. He knew how complicated it was. He knew how much I wanted her approval. "I did," I said softly, brushing the hair back from his forehead. "Is she coming?" I looked at him, and I decided in that moment not to burden him with the truth of her cruelty. Not yet. He needed to heal. "No," I said, keeping my voice steady. "She can't make it, but we're going to be fine, James. We're going to be just fine." I sat down and opened my laptop, which I had brought to do work remotely. But I didn't open my work email. Instead, I opened a folder labeled Real Estate. Assets. I pulled up the deed to 42 Oakwood Drive. There it was, black and white, legally binding. Owner, Ava Miller. Barbara lived there. Barbara acted like she owned it. Barbara had hosted garden parties there where she took credit for the landscaping I paid for. But she had forgotten one crucial thing. She was a guest. A guest who had just insulted the host in the most unforgivable way possible. To understand why this betrayal broke me, you have to understand the dynamic that had ruled my life since I was 5 years old. In the ecosystem of our family, Ruby was the rare, exotic orchid that required constant tending, specific humidity, and special soil. I was the oak tree in the backyard, sturdy, ignored, expected to weather every storm without complaint, and occasionally chopped at to provide firewood for the orchid's greenhouse. Ruby, 2 years younger than me, was always sensitive. That was the word Barbara used. If Ruby failed a test, it was because the teacher was mean. If Ruby quit a job after 2 weeks, it was because the environment was toxic. If Ruby needed money, it was an investment in her future. I, on the other hand, was capable. "Ava doesn't need help," Barbara would say to our relatives at Thanksgiving. "Ava is a machine, she just gets things done." It wasn't a compliment, it was an excuse to neglect me. By the time we were adults, the roles were calcified. I became a senior operations manager for a logistics firm. My job was literally to fix problems, to streamline chaos, to make things work. I was good at it. I made a 6-figure salary. I married James, an architect who was kind and stable. We built a life of quiet success. Ruby was a creative. She floated from being a jewelry designer to a life coach to, most recently, a lifestyle curator on social media. She had 3 kids with 2 different fathers, and she was currently married to a man who was perpetually about to close a big deal, but somehow never had his wallet when the check came. And Barbara worshipped her. Barbara saw herself in Ruby. They were both beautiful, chaotic, and fundamentally helpless without someone else's money. Barbara had been a receptionist in her youth, but she had married my father, a hardworking contractor, and immediately retired to a life of luncheons and tennis clubs she couldn't afford. When Dad died, the reality of his modest savings should have hit her. But I stepped in. I didn't want my mother to struggle. I wanted to be the good daughter. I wanted, desperately, for her to look at me with the same adoration she gave Ruby. I thought if I just wrote enough checks, if I solved enough problems, she would finally love me. I remember one Christmas, 3 years ago, I had just bought Barbara a brand new HVAC system because hers had died. It cost me $7,000. I wrapped the receipt in a box with a note that said, "Warmth for the winter. Love, Ava." Ruby gave her a framed poem she had written. It was printed on regular printer paper in a cheap frame from a dollar store. Barbara cried over the poem. She put it on the mantle. She looked at my box and said, "Oh, practical as always, Ava. Thank you." That was the dynamic. I paid for the stage, the lights, and the theater, and Ruby stood in the spotlight receiving the applause. But now, the antagonist of my life wasn't just a dynamic. It was a specific person with a specific agenda. Barbara wasn't just a passive participant. She was actively siphoning my life force. I sat in the hospital room, watching James sleep, and I thought about Barbara's appearance the last time I saw her. She was 62, but she looked 50. She had regular Botox, which she hinted I should pay for, but I refused. She wore designer cashmere gifts from Ruby, bought with money Ruby borrowed from me, and she drove that Lexus. She had this way of looking at me, a slight pursing of the lips, a critical scan up and down. That made me feel like I was 12 years old and wearing dirty clothes. "You look tired, Ava," she would say. "You work too hard. You should be more like Ruby. She prioritizes self-care." Self-care. Easy to prioritize self-care when someone else pays your mortgage. The anger in my chest was hardening into something cold and heavy, like a stone. I realized that Barbara didn't just prefer Ruby, she viewed me with a distinct lack of respect. She thought I was a fool. She thought I was a limitless resource that would never dry up, no matter how much she took or how poorly she treated me. She was about to find out that even the sturdiest oak tree eventually falls. And when it does, it crushes everything in its path. I didn't act immediately. I am an operations manager. I don't operate on impulse. I operate on data, strategy, and execution. For the next 4 days, I lived in that hospital room. I worked from my laptop while James slept. I took conference calls in the hallway. I wiped his face with a cool cloth when the ever spiked. I was exhausted, running on caffeine and adrenaline, but my mind was sharper than it had ever been. During those 4 days, Barbara didn't call once. Not once. Ruby sent a text on Tuesday, heard about James. "Bummer, hope he's okay. Mom says you're stressed. Don't forget to breathe. Sparkles." Bummer, my husband's spine was fused with titanium rods, and it was a bummer. On Wednesday, James was moved out of the ICU and into a regular room. The immediate danger of death had passed, replaced by the crushing reality of logistics. The rehabilitation center he needed was out of network. The cost was going to be astronomical, around $15,000 a month for the specialized care he required to walk again properly. I sat with our financial planner on a Zoom call, looking at our liquid assets. We were okay for now, but 6 months of this. We would burn through our savings. We would have to dip into retirement. "Unless," the planner said, "you have any other non-liquid assets you could leverage." I looked at the spreadsheet. My eyes drifted to the line item, investment property 42 Oakwood Drive. Estimated value, $650,000. Market is hot. It wasn't an investment property. It was my mother's house. But on paper, it was a pile of money sitting there, housing a woman who couldn't be bothered to visit her son-in-law. "Ava," the planner asked. "I might," I said slowly. "I have a property, it's fully paid off, no mortgage." "Well," he said, "selling that would solve all your liquidity issues immediately. You could pay for the best rehab center in the state and still have a cushion." I closed the laptop. I needed to be sure. I needed to give her one last chance. It was a test, I suppose. A final, desperate hope that there was a mother inside that woman somewhere. I called her that evening. "Hi, Mom," I said. "Ava, I was just about to call you," she lied. "How is John?" "James," I corrected, my voice flat. "He's James." "Right, James, how is he?" "He's moving to rehab soon. It's going to be expensive, Mom. Very expensive. I'm looking at our finances and, well, things are going to be tight." "Oh, money," she scoffed. "You always worry about money. You have plenty. You have that big job." "I have big bills now, too," I said. "Mom, I need to talk to you about the house." The line went silent instantly. The air shifted. She knew. "What about the house?" Her voice was sharp, dangerous. "I need to cut back on expenses," I said carefully. "I can't keep paying the property taxes and the insurance and the maintenance on Oakwood while paying for James's care. I need you to start contributing. Maybe rent, or at least covering the utilities and taxes. Rent, she shrieked the word. You want to charge your own mother rent after all I've done for you? All you've done for me? I asked, genuinely curious. Mom, I've paid for that house for 12 years. I'm just asking for help now because we are in a crisis. I am on a fixed income, Ava. You know that. Ruby needs my help right now. I can't be giving you money. You're supposed to take care of me. That was the deal when you bought the place. There was no deal, I said, my voice rising. It was a kindness, and now I need kindness in return. You are being abusive, she spat. Financial abuse, that's what this is. Threatening an old woman with homelessness because your husband can't drive properly. The breath left my lungs, because your husband can't drive properly. That was it. The bridge didn't just burn, she nuked it. Okay, I said. Okay, Mom, you're right. I shouldn't ask you for rent. Exactly, she huffed. I'm glad you came to your senses. I'll figure something else out, I said. Goodbye, Mom. I hung up. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I picked up the phone and dialed a number I had looked up earlier. Hello, Reynolds Real Estate? Yes, this is Ava Miller. I'd like to speak to an agent about listing a property. Yes, immediately. It's vacant. Well, practically. The confrontation didn't happen in person. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of a screaming match where she could play the victim to the neighbors. I handled it like a business transaction. I hired a process server. 2 days later, on a Friday morning, while Barbara was likely drinking coffee in the sunroom I had paid to have renovated, a man named forceful-looking Mike knocked on the door. I wasn't there, but I know exactly how it went because she called me 30 seconds later. I was in a meeting with the rehab facility administrators. I saw her name on my phone. I silenced it. She called again and again. Then Ruby called. Then Ruby texted, WTF Mom is hysterical. What did you do? I waited until my meeting was over. I walked out to the parking lot, sat in my car, and called Barbara back. Ava, she was screaming so loud the audio distorted. There is a man here. He gave me a paper. It says notice to vacate. It says intent. To sell, is this a joke? Is this some sick joke? It's not a joke, Mom, I said calmly. I told you I needed to solve my financial issues. You refused to help with the costs of the house. So, I'm selling the asset. You have 30 days to vacate. That's the legal requirement in our state for a tenant at will. Tenant, she sounded like she was choking. I am your mother. This is MY House. Legally, it's not, I said. The deed is in my name. I paid for it. I pay the taxes. You are a guest who has overstayed her welcome. I will sue you, she screamed. I will tell everyone. I will tell the whole family what a heartless monster you are, kicking your mother out on the street. You won't be on the street, I said. You can go live with Ruby. She needs you, remember? She's so stressed. You can go help her with the kids. Ruby doesn't have room, she yelled. Her house is small, and she has the children. Well, I said, that sounds like a problem for the family to solve. I'm busy, Mom. I have a husband to take care of. You ungrateful little B***TCH, she hissed. If you do this, I will never speak to you again. Mom, I said, looking at myself in the rearview mirror. My eyes were tired, but they were clear. You barely speak to me now unless you want money, so I guess nothing will change. I hung up and blocked her number. Then I blocked Ruby's number. I sat there for a moment, listening to the quiet of the car. It felt like I had just cut off a limb. It hurt, a phantom pain throbbing where the connection used to be, but it also felt lighter. The heavy weight of expectation, of duty, of constantly trying to fill a bucket with a hole in the bottom, it was gone. But I knew it wasn't over. Barbara wouldn't go quietly. She was a woman who cared about appearances more than anything, and I had just threatened to dismantle her entire image. She would strike back. The fallout was immediate and nuclear. Barbara didn't pack. She went on a PR tour. Within 24 hours, my phone was blowing up with messages from aunts, cousins, and family friends I hadn't spoken to in years. Aunt Linda, Ava, I heard what happened. I can't believe you would do this to your mother. She is elderly. Cousin Mike, seriously? Kicking her out? That's low, even for you. She had spun a narrative that was truly a work of fiction. According to the grapevine, I was having a mental breakdown. I was jealous of Ruby. I was greedy and wanted the money for a lavish vacation. She conveniently left out the part about James being in rehab. She left out the part about me paying her bills for 12 years. She posted on Facebook a long, rambling post about ungrateful children and serpent's teeth, accompanied by a photo of her crying. It had 40 comments of sympathy. I didn't respond to any of them. I followed the advice of my lawyer, whom I had retained the moment the process server left. Do not engage. Let the legal documents do the talking. But the pressure was mounting. One afternoon, I came home to grab some clothes and found Ruby waiting in my driveway. She leaned against my car, her arms crossed. She looked furious. "You need to stop this," she said, not even saying hello. "Get off my car, Ruby," I said, walking past her to the front door. "Mom is a wreck," she shouted, following me. "She's calling me every 10 minutes. I can't handle this, Ava. I have a life. I have anxiety." I spun around so fast she flinched. "You have anxiety?" I laughed, a harsh, jagged sound. "My husband is learning how to walk again. I am paying $15,000 a month for his care. And you're worried because Mom is annoying you. Why can't you just let her stay?" Ruby whined. "You have money. You always have money." "I don't have infinite money, Ruby," I said. "And why can't she live with you? You have a guest room. You have a basement." "That's my yoga studio," Ruby exclaimed, as if I had suggested she sleep in a sewer. "And Ken doesn't want her there. She's a lot, Ava. You know how she is." I stared at her. "So, let me get this straight. She's too much for you to handle, even though she worships the ground you walk on. But you expect me to pay $500,000 to house her while she treats me like garbage." "Ideally, yes," Ruby said with zero irony. "Because that's your role, you're the provider." "Not anymore," I said. "My role is resigned. The position is vacant." "If you go through with this," Ruby said, narrowing her eyes, "Mom says she's going to sue you for, what did she call it? Squatters' rights, adverse possession." I actually laughed. "She can try. I have receipts, Ruby. I have 12 years of bank transfers, property tax records, and emails where she acknowledges the house is mine. Let her sue. It'll just drain what little money she has left." "You're a monster," Ruby spat. "No," I said, unlocking my door. "I'm just broke and I'm done." I slammed the door in her face. "But Ru, I was right about one thing, Barbara wasn't leaving." The 30 days were ticking down, and the realtor told me Barbara was refusing to let them show the house. She had changed the locks. She had put up a sign in the yard that said, "Not for sale." She was digging in. She thought if she made it difficult enough, I would fold. She thought I was still the little girl who just wanted her mommy to love her. She didn't realize that the little girl had died in the hospital hallway the moment Barbara chose mimosas over her daughter's pain. I called my lawyer. "She's obstructing the sale. She changed the locks." "Okay," he said. "We can file for an emergency eviction order based on property damage and obstruction. It's aggressive, though." "Do it," I said, "and send the sheriff." I wasn't playing anymore. I was going to war. The eviction wasn't quiet. It was a spectacle. I had hoped, perhaps naively, that the threat of the sheriff would be enough to make Barbara pack her boxes and leave with some shred of dignity. I should have known better. Barbara didn't do dignity. She did drama. It was 9:00 a.m. on a Tuesday. The neighborhood, a quiet, leafy suburb where people prided themselves on their manicured lawns and silent disagreements, was watching. I stood by my car, arms crossed, watching the sheriff's cruiser pull up to the curb. Next to me was my lawyer, David, a different David, sharp and unsentimental, and a locksmith. Barbara had refused to leave. The deadline had passed at midnight. I walked up the driveway, the gravel crunching under my boots. I felt a surreal detachment, as if I were watching a movie of someone else's life. This wasn't my mother's house. This was just a building, a collection of wood and brick that I had poured my life savings into. The sheriff, a large man with a weary expression, knocked on the door. "Ms. Barbara Miller, this is the sheriff's department. We have a court order for possession of the property." Silence, then the sound of something heavy being dragged against the door. She was barricading herself in. "Ms. Miller," the sheriff called out, louder this time, "please open the door or we will have to force entry." "Go away," Barbara's voice shrieked from inside, muffled but audible enough for the neighbors across the street, who were now standing on their porches with coffee mugs, to hear. "This is my home. My daughter is a thief. Help, police." "Ma'am, I am the police," the sheriff sighed. He nodded to the locksmith. As the drill whirred to life, a silver SUV screeched to a halt at the curb. It was Aunt Linda, Barbara's sister, followed closely by Ruby's car. Barbara had called in the cavalry. Linda stormed up the driveway, her face red. "Ava, stop this immediately. Have you lost your mind? Evicting your own mother with the police? The whole family is disgusted with you." Ruby was behind her, looking less angry and more panicked, her eyes darting around to see who was watching. "Ava, seriously, this is embarrassing. Everyone is looking." "Good," I said, my voice cutting through the morning air like a whip. "Let them look." "You are heartless," Linda spat, pointing a finger in my face. "Your mother has given you everything, and you throw her out like garbage because you're greedy." I reached into my oversized tote bag. I hadn't come empty-handed. I pulled out a thick, black binder. I had spent the last 3 nights organizing it. It was the ledger. Every bank transfer, every mortgage payment, every repair bill, every loan to Ruby, every text message where Barbara asked for cash. "Linda," I said, holding the binder out, "you say she gave me everything. Here is the record of the last 12 years. I have paid $345,000 in mortgage payments. I have paid for the roof, the car, the heating." I flipped the binder open to a bookmarked page, a printout of a text thread from last year where Barbara called Linda a busybody hag, while asking me for money to buy Linda a birthday gift. "Read it," I said, shoving the binder into Linda's chest. She instinctively grabbed it. "I don't want to see your lies," Linda stammered, but her eyes were already scanning the page. "It's not lies, it's math," I said coldly. "I asked her for help one time when James was in the ICU. One time. She refused because she was drinking mimosas with Ruby. So, the Bank of Ava is closed." At that moment, the lock clicked. The door swung open. Barbara stood in the foyer. She looked deranged. She was wearing a silk robe, her hair wild, holding a porcelain vase as if she might swing it. "You," she screamed at me, "you devil." The sheriff stepped in front of me. "Ma'am, put the vase down. You have 5 minutes to gather your personal essentials and vacate the premises. The rest can be collected by a moving company later." Barbara dropped the vase. It didn't break, it just thudded onto the rug. She looked past the sheriff, past me, and locked eyes with Ruby. "Ruby," she wailed, throwing her hands out. "Ruby, tell them I'm coming with you. Tell this monster that I have a place to go." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the birds seemed to stop singing. All eyes turned to Ruby. My sister, the golden child, the one who had received all the love, all the attention, and a significant portion of my money via Barbara. Ruby shifted her weight, clutching her designer purse. She looked at Barbara, then at her car, then at the neighbors watching. "Mom," Ruby said, her voice high and thin, I can't." Barbara froze. "What?" "I can't take you in," Ruby said, stepping back. "Ken said no, and the house is so small. And my anxiety, Mom, you know how you get. I can't handle the stress right now. I need to focus on my family." The betrayal on Barbara's face was almost biblical. It was the look of a creator realizing their creation despised them. "But," Barbara whispered, "but I chose you over her." "I know," Ruby said, tears welling up, tears of self-pity, not empathy. "But you can't live with me. Maybe Aunt Linda." Linda, still clutching the binder that detailed exactly how much money Barbara had blown over the years, looked at her sister. She looked at the text message I had flagged where Barbara insulted her. I don't have the room either, Barbara, Linda muttered, closing the binder and handing it back to me. She wouldn't meet Barbara's eyes. Barbara stood alone in the doorway. The sheriff gently took her arm. "Ma'am, it's time." She didn't fight him. The fight had drained out of her the moment Ruby said no. She slumped, suddenly looking every minute of her 62 years. She walked past me without looking at me. She walked past Ruby, who was crying into a tissue. She walked past Linda. She stood on the sidewalk, a small figure with 2 shopping bags of clothes the sheriff had allowed her to grab, looking at the house she had pretended to own for a decade. I turned to the locksmith. "Change them," I said, "all of them." The house sold in 4 days. The market was hot, and despite Barbara's attempts to sabotage it, the property was prime real estate. I didn't even go to the closing. I signed the papers electronically from James's bedside at the rehab center. When the notification hit my phone, wire transfer received. $612,000, I didn't feel triumph. I felt a profound, quiet release. It was the feeling of setting down a heavy backpack you hadn't realized you were carrying for 20 years. We paid the rehab center in full for 6 months of treatment. We paid off our own mortgage. We put the rest into a trust for our future children, should we decide to have them. James came home 3 months later. He walked through the front door with a cane, moving slowly, but he walked. The night he came home, we sat on our back porch, watching the fireflies in the yard. It was just us. No drama, no demands, no phone ringing with guilt trips. "Do you miss them?" James asked me, reaching out to cover my hand with his. I thought about it. I thought about the silence of my phone. I thought about the lack of panic attacks when I saw a mom notification. "I miss the mother I wanted," I said softly. "I don't miss the mother I had." We heard through the grapevine, mostly from a contrite Aunt Linda, who occasionally emailed me updates about the aftermath. It was ugly. Barbara had ended up in a cheap extended-stay motel for a week, burning through her meager savings. When the money ran out, she showed up at Ruby's door with her suitcases, screaming that she had nowhere else to go. Ruby had called the police on her own mother. The irony was not lost on me. Eventually, Barbara had to move 2 states away to live with a distant cousin who needed a live-in caretaker. She was essentially working as a maid for a roof over her head. The woman who had refused to work, who had looked down on me for working too hard, was now scrubbing floors in Ohio. Ruby's marriage fell apart 6 months later. Without Barbara there to babysit for free and validate her delusions, the stress fractured her perfect life. She tried to reach out to me once, asking for a small loan to get an apartment. I didn't reply. I simply blocked the new number. I realized then that I hadn't just evicted my mother from a house. I had evicted a toxic system from my life. I had stopped playing the role they had assigned me. I wasn't the ATM. I wasn't the fixer. I wasn't the sturdy oak tree that existed only to be chopped down for their warmth. I was Ava. I was a wife to a husband who loved me. I was a professional who was good at her job. And for the first time in my life, I was free. Justice didn't come with a gavel or a thunderclap. It came in the quiet mornings where I drank my coffee in peace, knowing that everything I owned and everything I was belonged solely to me.